Remember more, improve your focus, and multitask better. Hum is a brain sharpener that helps you do all three. Hum's wearable boosts your working memory and will be available in late 2021. Sign up to be notified when Hum launches and to learn more about the science behind Hum at thinkhum.com. That's think.com. Hum is designed for healthy adults and should not be used if you're pregnant, have cognitive impairment, implanted devices, or a history of seizures. The Hum patch is not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent disease. To learn more, go to thinkhum.com.
The kind of touring thing, I thought it would just be like so exciting, every day would be amazing, and what kind of ended up happening was I stopped being excited by things. I stopped getting, being happy, to be honest, but I didn't understand what it was at the time.
My name is Halina Rafai, and this is the A Sonic Hug podcast. Over the coming months and episodes, you will hear the voices of people from different walks of life who deal, experience, and battle mental health issues. I've obviously been aware of the band Glasvegas for several years now, but I didn't know any of the members. I first met Robert at an educational mental health event, and it was then that I became aware of the work he was doing with his PhD in mapping the music industry. This podcast will further cement why it's important he is doing this, as he talks about his experiences touring and the toll it took on his mental health. This is Robert's story.
My name's Robert Allen. I am in a band called Glasvegas. I've did that for about maybe 15 years now, maybe more. And recently I've went back to university and I got my master's, and I'm currently doing a PhD at Glasgow University, and I am mapping and measuring the Scottish music industry. Personally, out with being in a band, I've never really experienced any mental health problems, which was why it was quite strange then when I started touring with Glasvegas quite extensively, that I started to kind of come across things that I hadn't felt before, and I didn't know what they were. So yeah, I guess it was hard trying to figure that out at the time because I hadn't experienced them before. I guess to give just a little bit of context, I guess before we had started touring, obviously everyone's dream if you want to be in a band is to go on tour. So I'd always dreamed of getting a record deal and doing those things. And then when it actually happened, it was quite a different reality to what I had expected. So, like for instance, the kind of touring thing, I thought it would just be like so exciting, every day would be amazing. And what kind of ended up happening was I stopped being excited by things. I stopped getting, being happy, to be honest. But I didn't understand what it was at the time. Like I'll give you an example. So it was like, I love like U2 and bands like that, and Oasis and all these kind of big kind of stadium bands. I really like that. And one day our manager came in and said, "Oh, U2 have asked you to go on tour with them." And I remember I didn't feel anything, which is a weird thing, I guess, for somebody to understand. But I didn't feel happy. I just didn't feel anything. And I remember thinking, like, this is strange that I've got no feeling, because if someone had said this to me like 5 years before, I would have been like running around the room like so excited. And I guess that's the first time I remember thinking there's something not right and I don't feel the way I should be feeling about this. And then it kind of progressively got worse as we toured more. And I think like that first album we did something like 250, 300 shows in a year. And that by the end of that, I was just so out of sorts. And yeah, it was quite a mad experience. I grew up in a very working class family where mental health wasn't spoken about because it wasn't really understood. I think the education of it wasn't there. So if someone in your family had mental health problems, they were just crazy. And obviously that's probably a generational thing as well. And now because I'm older, I understand that a lot more. So I didn't really know how to explain these things. And also because, as I said, I hadn't felt these things before I'd went on tour versus when I had, I couldn't kind of make sense of it. And even though I was best friends with the guys in the band and I was friends with all the people on tour with us, I just didn't feel like I could speak about it. I guess the realities of being on tour and kind of maybe what added to to the way that I was feeling. Both the thing is that I can explain this now because I know what it is, so I'll explain what I've learned. It was a chemical imbalance, and it's a woman from Edinburgh Royal Infirmary that I spoke to, and she explained it to me. Your adrenaline and your noradrenaline and your cortisol, they spike up when you do a gig, and then what happens is when the gig's finished, they come back down, but those levels dip below where your baseline is. So if you were to do that over time, for long periods of time, which is what people do when they're in bands, it can start to have a negative effect on you, and it can cause insomnia, it can cause fatigue, it can cause you to get unwell. And then when you do that for long periods of time, it triggers something called toxic stress. And that is when you can get into a deep depression. So I guess that was what was happening, but I couldn't describe what was happening to anyone. I couldn't explain it because I didn't understand it, because I had never felt that before. And then I think to kind of make it even worse, I started feeling guilt because I knew I was in a position where I was really lucky to be doing what I was doing, but I couldn't make sense of feeling the way I was feeling then. So then I think those two things together, there was a period of time that was really difficult. To begin with, I couldn't sleep on tour. That was one of the things. After shows, I was absolutely buzzing. You would be up, but you knew you had to like go somewhere the next day, do something. So I would start drinking, and then I'd always drank, but I started drinking a lot on tour. And then, as you do, one thing leads to another. You start taking other drugs, and you start doing this. It was never a problem, but it was just a lot. So I think when you start adding all those things together, and I mean, alcohol is one of the worst things for your head, to be honest, whether you're on tour, whether you're not on tour. And the thing is with musicians is that alcohol is given to you for free. It's an industry where drinking is promoted, because you walk into a venue at 2:00 in the afternoon and you've got a fridge full of beer. And I mean, the way it got for us was that they had to hide the spirits before the gigs because it was like, let's give them spirits after the gigs, we won't give it to them before. So we would always have access to beer in the afternoon. I mean, none of us really drank in the afternoon, but I think it kind of started with alcohol, moved on to drugs, and then it was just a cycle after that. And it's a cycle that you can't get out of. And then it's things like just eating rubbish food when you're on tour, and not looking after yourself, and staying in bed all day and getting up to do a show and then staying up all through the night, and all of those things combined, it's just not a good mixture for people. But the one thing I would say though is that over time I've kind of learned why I feel like that, and then recognise it and try and do something about it and all of those things. But I think for young bands who are starting out, it would be good if they had someone give them a bit of advice. To be fair, I wouldn't have taken that advice, but it would be good if there was someone there that would maybe know what was happening, because I think that would definitely help. There was one show in particular where I thought, I don't know if I can do this anymore. And it was one of our biggest shows. We were in Stockholm, and it was probably about 3/4 of the way through our tour. It'd been pretty hard as well. It was the middle of winter. There was hardly any sunshine. Me and the singer in the band, James, we're family, and we got on great. We never fight. We never argue. There's never anything. And I just remember there was one point he said something to me that was really innocent, and I looked at him and I thought, I'm going to rip your fucking head off. And then I felt really guilty about it, and I was just like, I don't know if I can do this anymore, because it was turning me into something and somebody that I wasn't. And I felt, again, that was coming back to the guilt thing. Then I felt a lot, a lot of guilt, because I thought, I don't want to do this, but there's so many other people that would kill to be in the position I'm in. And I remember James just looking at me like, what's wrong with you? Because that's the other thing I should note as well, is that not everyone in the band felt the way that I did. It is quite an individual thing, obviously, and everyone's different, built differently, can handle different pressures, and that was the first of many. And it was just like, yeah, I don't think I can do this anymore. There was other little times along the way where there was little bits, but I think having the support of the guys in the band was really good as well. Although we've never actually really spoken about it too much, but because we're all best mates, I think that probably helped with that. So I guess it kind of came to a head. It was actually when we'd stopped touring. What happened was we'd stopped touring, and I was back in Glasgow, and I had been drinking a lot. I was like drinking like 2 bottles of spirits a day and going out to the pub and doing loads of different things. And it was our manager, Denise, had said to me, you should keep an eye on your drinking. And I was like, oh no, my drinking's fine. I'm totally fine. And she was like, I think you should just keep a wee eye on it. And then I said, well, do you know what? I was like, I'll stop drinking for a week and I'll prove to you that I can stop drinking. So that week turned into 6 months. And within that 6 month period, things became a lot clearer, and I started to be able to understand why I'd acted certain ways, why I'd felt certain ways, and then understand how not to do that in the future. And then when it came to touring after that, I had a much better understanding of the kind of what to do and what not to do. But it kind of took that clarity and taking for somebody saying to me, I think you should have a little look at this and just make sure you're feeling okay. And then obviously there's been periods of time over the years. I wrote a dissertation for university on musicians and touring and how they feel and mental health and anxiety and that kind of stuff. And what was interesting was I went back and I spoke to the manager of my band, and she told me all the stories of what was happening, and it's things that I couldn't even remember. And it was really embarrassing listening back to what she was saying to me, because the way that I had acted, I'd been an idiot. But I think she understood, and other people understood that was round about the band, that we were acting out a character, and we were lucky that they had known us and they were family members or whatever. So they kind of knew that wasn't really us, and it was different pressures and the difficulties with touring. So it was interesting to kind of see that perspective. Going back to what I'd said before about when I spoke to Denise, when I was asking her about the touring thing, I upset her so much, and I hope she doesn't mind me saying this in this podcast. I don't think she will, but she was just reminding me of some of the times that I just kind of spoke to her like shit, and I just wasn't very nice to her. It's a shame, because I feel really guilty about that. I've never been mean to anybody, but I know that there's been times where I've not handled situations the best and probably overreacted. As the thing is, everyone does it in all walks of life, but I know that there's times where I have, and the older I get, that's the kind of things I try and not do. And I think I'm getting better at that. But I mean, my behaviour, James's behaviour, everybody's behaviour in the band has affected somebody, because for every one person you speak to that says, the band are great and it's all great on tour and everyone's happy, there'll be another person who's maybe not got us on a good day. And it just takes that one person when you're having a bad day to counter all the other. I totally regret certain things that I've said, certain things that I've done, but I know that a lot of that was because of how I was feeling and the pressures. It was mostly Denise, I think. Denise took the brunt of it, probably because she's family as well. Denise is James's big sister, she's my big cousin. So I guess sometimes if those people are about because they're trying to help, you don't always see it as help. And you can see it as them trying to get in your way or, stop you from having fun, when really they're seeing the big picture of what's happening on tour. They can see, you're falling apart, but maybe they don't want to say you're falling apart, so they'll try and approach it from a different angle. Yeah, so sorry, Denise, if you're listening to this. Even when I tour now, I still have the same pressures, but I just know how to deal with them a little bit better, which is one of the reasons why we don't tour a lot anymore, because none of us really like touring that much anyway to the degree that we did before. So we just try and control it and do little 2-week bursts or 3-week bursts of touring. So even though I understand those triggers and I understand why things feel the way they do, and they're still there and they still need to be kept in check. I mean, I think some of the things that I've mentioned could probably be helped by loads of different factors, and it's probably really simple things. I mean, my own band, we had someone selling merch for us who was a really good friend of the band. Her name was Geraldine, and she had been a social worker. We didn't mean for it to happen like that, but see, having someone there on tour just to keep an eye on you and keep you in check, I don't think a lot of bands have that at a really basic level. Managers don't normally tour with the band. It's normally just crew in a band. So there's no one there to check in and just see how you're getting on. But again, I mean, there's been so many bands that said to us, oh, I wish we had a Geraldine. Big bands, big touring bands, you would be surprised just for somebody to talk to. And that's really all it comes down to. I think just sometimes people asking, are you okay, is such a powerful thing to be able to do. And I know that from my own experience. If someone didn't ask me how I was, I probably wouldn't tell them if I wasn't feeling good. So I think probably make sure people get a bit of a break in terms of, we were going from a tour, a 5-6 week tour, one day off, and then flying to America to do however many weeks. It was a constant thing. I think people just need a break and just to be checked in on every once in a while. I think the realities of touring schedules and things like that are never going to change, but I think the things that really simple things, like just checking in on people and making sure you're getting a break. From day one with the band, we've all had each other's backs because we're best mates. So that kind of carried on to when we were touring and doing those things. And I mean, for myself, it was never that I didn't want to speak to the band. It was just that wasn't the kind of relationship that we had. But the thing is, I can always see with Paul when he's struggling in tour, and I know how to deal with that. And I can see with James when he's in tour, when he's struggling, and I know how to deal with that. So that's the kind of unspoken thing, I guess, of, giving someone some space, checking in with them, and I guess they can see that with me. Off the road, me and James have definitely gotten a lot closer in terms of speaking about things now. So like if there's something bothering us now, we're probably a lot more likely to speak about it than we were. But I guess it just still comes back down to that guy thing and maybe not always wanting to be like, I don't think any of us would ever say, I'm feeling a bit down. It would always take for someone else to say, how are you doing? Are you okay? Because you don't seem yourself. I think the alcohol thing is one of the biggest issues facing bands on tour, to be honest, and it's something that's inbuilt within the culture, and it's dangerous. It's dangerous for young bands. I mean, venues, I guess, have got some responsibility, but all the venues are doing is providing what the managers are asking for. I mean, I know from my own experience, our managers maybe try to hold back some of the alcohol until later on in the day. I know from other bands, it would be the exact same thing. Like their managers wouldn't let them get spirits. They would only put beers on during the day so they couldn't get too drunk before the show. I mean, if you think about it, what other job in the world can you go into and start drinking at lunchtime? Like there's none, and it's bizarre that's like it's normal, and it's bizarre to even say that. I was speaking to Alan McGee, and he was basically just talking about the amount of problems he's had with some of his bands over the years, and it all comes back to alcohol. It all comes back to alcohol because that affects everything. It affects your mood, it affects your relationships with other people, it affects your job as being a musician, and it's just crazy. I do think alcohol's one of the worst ones, but I don't really know who's to blame for that because it is just so ingrained in the touring life. I mean, even I stopped drinking for a period of time. That was strange because I did it when I was on tour, and there were so many people. It wasn't the band, but it was other people were treating me like there was something wrong. Why I wouldn't drink, and it was just like I'm just choosing not to drink. But then they thought there was something wrong because I was choosing not to drink. It's mad, and I've seen it with so many bands, and yeah. But I have to say as well, I don't think that the drinking alone causes the issues on tour. Sometimes I think it can be a combination of both, but as I said, again, everyone's different. So to be honest, when I'm at home, like I have like a bottle of wine maybe once a week with the wife. That's kind of how the extent to alcohol. It's never really been an issue, but I think that the alcohol on tour was my own coping mechanism. Do you know what's funny? Because these are the first times I'm speaking about it, so I'm kind of making sense of it in my head as well. So I think that's probably why I drank so much. I continue to drink even just now when I'm on tour. Up to now, like the last big tour we did was 2018, and then like again I was drinking loads, and I knew I was drinking loads, but the difference was I was eating really healthy. I was running every day, so I was trying to kind of counteract the things that I knew was bad with things that would help. But like alcohol's never really been a problem for me outside the band. So I kind of knew even when Denise had said to me, "Do you think that's okay?" I just don't really have that kind of personality. I've never really been like that. I'm quite lucky, I guess. I went back to university in 2016. I decided to go back and get a degree, and that kind of escalated. And then I got my honours and blah blah blah. And I'm doing a PhD just now, but I decided to do my dissertation on kind of musicians and their mental health. It was a guy called Jim Prime. I don't know if you know Jim from Deacon Blue. He kind of runs a music course there, and he was like, "You need to do a dissertation in this. You've got experience with this. Why don't you try this?" That kind of made me kind of start thinking about a lot of those things again. So what I wanted to do was with that dissertation, I wanted to kind of look at were musicians more susceptible to kind of getting mental health problems and anxiety? What were the causes and kind of what help was there? And it just, the whole thing totally like blew my mind because it was, for me, that was like therapy almost, which was, I'd never really thought I'd needed that, but I started making sense of all my own experiences. So I was speaking to musicians, I was speaking to crew members, I was speaking to managers of bands, and there was so that's how I ended up speaking to Claire. Her name is Claire Bashford, and she works at the Edinburgh Royal Hospital. I don't know if she's still there now, but she's like over 20 years experience in mental health issues. And basically what I was doing, I was explaining my experiences to her. and saying, so this is what I experienced. Can you explain to me what that was? Because that was the easiest way that I could kind of get her to explain what would cause certain things. And it was just she was surprised that I hadn't had a breakdown. That was essentially what she said. She said that she was surprised that I hadn't been sectioned because of the way I was feeling and what I was explaining to her about my feelings. She was like, anybody else would have been sectioned straight away. So that was surprising to hear. But it was really when she started explaining a lot of the kind of health reasons for it, so like the cortisol, the adrenaline, all of that stuff, it just started making sense to me. That word again, guilt. A lot of the guilt that I'd been feeling started kind of subsiding a little bit because I realised that it was normal to feel like that. That was kind of how I got to kind of looking into this in the first place. I mean, then at the end of it, she was totally fascinated by it, and then she wanted to go and do her own research on musicians and touring and that kind of lifestyle as well. So that was such a valuable meeting of minds. If someone needed help, obviously, I guess we're talking about in a music context, that there is help there for them. And I didn't know what help was out there until I did a little bit of research on it. And the key service that's there is by Help Musicians. They did a big study back in 2016 into musicians and mental health, and the findings were really grim. So what they did was they started a service called Music Minds Matter, and it's a 24/7 helpline that you can call anywhere around the world, and you can speak to someone. And it is essentially for what we're saying, that sometimes people just need to talk. People just need somebody to listen to them. So that's what it is. It's a service that people can call, whether you're on the road or off the road. They would probably speak to anyone if anyone needed help. I think it's one of the best things that's happened for music in the UK in a long time. And it's a shame because I still don't think a lot of people know about it. I still don't think that as a service, people really know it's there. I think moving forward for musicians, that there are some changes that need to happen, and there's some changes that could happen. There's a duty of care towards musicians. Now, whether that comes from an artist manager, someone at a label, whether that comes from a tour manager, I don't really know. But I think there needs to be someone who's on tour with a band who is in charge of making sure everyone's okay. And I don't just mean getting from A to B. I mean just checking in and being like, how you all doing? You okay? Any problems? That's the first thing. Then I think people who aren't actually on tour with a band, there needs to be, again, someone there checking in, because I think it's too easy sometimes that bands and musicians are a bit disposable, because there's always going to be new ones coming through. So instead of throwing people on the scrap heap when they are struggling, is to try and help them. But again, that's a financial issue, which I don't know if that would be taken on by a record label or whatever the service was that was helping. But the fundamental problem, I think, the biggest underlying problem for musicians on tour is probably alcohol. I mean, there's other smaller issues, things like precarity of work and not knowing where you're getting your money from. But I think when you add alcohol into any equation, it just messes things up. So again, I'm going to use that term, duty of care, by someone to make sure that the bands are looking after themselves and being okay. If I could tell myself, give myself a message when I was at my lowest, it would probably be, don't be hard on yourself. By that, what I mean is, I think all of my problems were quite small, and I put them all together and made them one big thing. I thought I should have been so grateful and happy and all these things for everything that was happening to me, and I wasn't, because when I was feeling bad about all these little things, why am I not excited about this? Why am I not excited that I'm in New York? Why am I not excited about this? Why would I just rather be at home just now? I couldn't make sense of all those things, and I had no one there to tell me that was okay. So it wasn't, I wish I could say, you're going to speak to a woman for a hospital in Edinburgh and she's going to explain all these things, and it's okay, and the way that you're feeling is okay. That is what I wish I could say to myself.
Remember more, improve your focus, and multitask better. Hum is a brain sharpener that helps you do all three. Hum's wearable boosts your working memory and will be available in late 2021. Sign up to be notified when Hum launches and to learn more about the science behind Hum at thinkhum.com. That's thinkhum.com. Hum is designed for healthy adults and should not be used if you're pregnant, have cognitive impairment, implanted devices, or a history of seizures. The Hum patch is not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent disease. To learn more, go to thinkhum.com.
Look, staying healthy isn't easy. Watching your diet, hitting the gym, avoiding stress. But a good night's rest helps boost your overall health and wellness. And it couldn't be easier. The new Sleep Number 360 Smart Bed is the only bed that effortlessly adjusts and responds to both of you. The result? You wake up ready for anything. Proven quality sleep is life-changing sleep. And now, the new Queen Sleep Number 360 P5 Smart Bed is only $17.99. Save $600. Only for a limited time. To learn more, go to sleepnumber.com.
That was Robert's story. It's 2021, and because of the pandemic, touring is off the agenda. So for me, this has been a really important podcast to record to look at some of the more negative aspects of the field. Robert talks about growing up in a working class background and speaks about a narrative we have heard many times whereby if someone has had mental health problems, they were regarded as crazy. A subject that was never really spoken about like it is now by a full generation, and with the addition of Robert not having had any previous experiences with mental health, then the impact of what happened to him on tour will no doubt have made it even harder. If we think about playing 250 to 300 live shows in a year, that's almost 50 odd days short of a full year, which is insane for me to try and comprehend. For your general public, they will often see this as a glamorous existence. One of classy hotels, adoring fans screaming for you, a party lifestyle and more. But as Robert says, there are harsh realities. It can often be travelling for hours on end on transport, not seeing the outside world for very long, playing a long show, not sleeping, and then repeating. When he talks about not feeling anything when some of the bigger opportunities were offered, many people who have or are experiencing depression will relate to this. It's one of the worst feelings because there is no feeling. There's a numbness that comes over you which you can't explain, but it makes it all the more understandable when he talks about the guilt that he experienced surrounding this. The pressure on people in the music industry is sometimes for me greater than a number of other jobs. The stigma attached to it, the lack of seriousness that some people pay to it is worrying. Many people who make a living from it feel like they have to hold so tightly to it that they can't let themselves feel anything but lucky, but that's not the case. When Robert talks about alcohol and how it became a coping mechanism along with drugs, it's no wonder that combined with so many shows he became ill. Many musicians and indeed the music industry will get such a high from the creativity they deliver. It's a natural thing, and creativity itself is something that we nourish as humans. It's what brings us to life and ironically helps our mental health. So when your body and mind are being abused in such a way, the love for it disappears and the stigma continues. It's a fact and always has been that alcohol has been provided as part of a touring or gig package. As Robert says, it's often a request, so it does start to make you question, at what point did this become the norm, and who needs to take accountability in trying to change this behaviour? We've been in lockdown for nearly a year now, so surely this is the time to start looking at planning fundamental changes to the way touring and gigs operate. Can we implement first aid mental health training in venues and within booking agencies? Can we look at the way that alcohol is provided and take more of a duty of care? Can we teach musicians, like any other profession, that it's not correct to drink whilst you're working? Can the government look at investing in upskilling people or creating jobs that provide more care for musicians? Can they collaborate with Help Musicians on this? Robert says that when people are trying to help you, you don't often see it, and he perhaps wouldn't have taken it at the time. Often it just takes someone to ask if you are okay. But it's people like Robert who could provide the education for so many and become a vital and relatable person for this industry. There are so many possibilities, and if there ever was a time to look at things, it's now. If you have experienced or experiencing anything described in this episode, you will find support information in the text with this podcast. A Sonic Hug podcast is recorded, produced and edited by me, Halina Rafai. We are also part of Scotland's podcasting network, The Big Light. Until next time, deep breaths.
Look, staying healthy isn't easy. Watching your diet, hitting the gym, avoiding stress. But a good night's rest helps boost your overall health and wellness. And it couldn't be easier. The new Sleep Number 360 Smart Bed is the only bed that effortlessly adjusts and responds to both of you. The result? You wake up ready for anything. Proven quality sleep is life-changing sleep. And now, the new Queen Sleep Number 360 P5 Smart Bed is only $17.99. Save $600. Only for a limited time. To learn more, go to sleepnumber.com.